Welcome back to another edition of the Stars and Stripes Cricket Podcast presented by Sportsnection. And on this episode, we have the co-founder of the Cricket Association for the Blind USA and also the former women's national team captain for USA Blind Cricket, Abey Finklea. Abey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
I met you at the Cricket Impact Summit in Santa Clara just before you went off to the World Cup. And I was completely fascinated by your story. And I felt bad because there was a sequence on the second day where you had to pick one of three options in terms of a breakout session. Because I guess I'm an egotistical idiot. Having worked in the media, I thought, oh, why don't I hang out with more people in cricket media? So I went out with the cricket media breakout session where it was all about other people in the cricket media and podcasters and broadcasters and other people who I've been around my entire life. I went with what was easy and what was comfortable rather than going out of my comfort zone. And it was only later on that I found out, I believe it was the next day, when Adam Hall may have called on you to recognize you and say, we want to hear from Abey Finklea, who's going to be going off to the Blind Cricket World Cup, Women's Cricket World Cup in India. And we got to hear you speak. And I thought, oh, Jesus, what a missed opportunity. I should have gone to the session where Abey Finklea was having the floor. And I've been curious ever since then. And now we're finally getting a chance to interact. So first off, we'll start at the World Cup. What was that experience like for you?
It was mind-blowing. So cricket obviously isn't super popular in the US yet. Definitely gaining momentum, but pretty slow. So when we first started trying to promote for the team, there was nobody in the blind community had any idea what cricket even was. Like there's a few people that knew, but most everybody had never even heard of the sport. So we had less than a year to pull together a team, train them, and take them to the World Cup. So when we hit the World Cup, our team had 5 months of training under our belt, and we were going to the World Cup and competing against the other nations. So it was this really surreal experience to go into it as a team of newbies, but also this team of just incredible women. Like everybody was new to the sport, but they were powerhouses. So being able to go into that and see, it didn't matter that we were new, we were able to compete and be a team. And that experience, I think, really shaped a lot of us on the team, just to be there with all the other women from all the other nations and be able to learn from the other teams, connect with the other teams, and just have an incredible experience.
What was the most incredible experience that you had while you were in India?
I think for me personally, it was playing the matches. So since we were, here in the US, we don't have another team to play against because we formed up the national team, kind of did it backwards. We started with the national, now we're trickling down to more state and regional levels. So at the time, we didn't have any other teams we could play against. So when we landed in India, that was our first actual match against people we'd never played with. Because we did mock matches with each other, but never on that scale. So going to the World Cup and seeing every single match, how our team's cohesion got better and better and better, and just seeing everybody click into place and learning so much, and just that feel of being on the field and the adrenaline rush. It was just, as a team, an amazing experience.
And from talking to you before we started recording, you said you're not really somebody who's been a sports person over the course of your life. So this isn't just a new cricket experience. This is a new sports experience, full stop for you. What was it about cricket that made you want to dive in head first and go all the way to the point where you're participating and captaining a team in the World Cup? Whereas previously, not only had you not been involved in blind cricket, you hadn't been involved in blind any sport.
Yeah, I would say it definitely was not by choice that I didn't grow up doing sports. I grew up in a super rural area in Colorado, so there was no other blind people outside of my siblings and no structured blind sports at all. So growing up, there wasn't really an opportunity for me to do any sports. It was something that always interested in me, but I didn't grow up with a TV either, so we never watched sports. So for me, I was in the mountains, so I did a lot of hiking, I did a lot of backpacking and outdoor stuff, and I liked being active, but I just didn't have an opportunity to get plugged in. And then my first real splash into the blind community was when 2024, I was able to get a scholarship to the National Federation of the Blind. And for that, they required me to go out to one of their national conferences. And that's when I first got introduced to the blind world in general. Even though I was 20 years old at the time, I'd never been in the blind world. So that was my first introduction to any blind sport. Cricket was my first try, and I just fell in love with it. Just that feeling of hitting the ball, throwing the ball, even though I was blind, couldn't see, I could hear the ball, and it just made all the difference. And really, really, it was my first introduction to sports, and it fired me up and made me want to do more.
Growing up, it sounds like you were not immersed in quote, quote, blind culture or visually impaired culture in a sense that even though you said you had siblings, I take it you were not going to a school that was a specialized tending to accommodate for visual impairment. These are not things that you were accustomed to on a daily basis, and you were living your life around the impairment, but not completely immersed in it in the same sense that you were when you went to this conference where you were introduced for cricket. So was that a conscious choice? Was that just a matter of circumstance for the rural area that you were growing up in Colorado, or how did that come to be over the course of your life?
Yeah, it was definitely a matter of circumstance because I was an hour from the nearest grocery store. I was in the mountains. So it wasn't, we didn't even have a school in the community where I lived. So I was homeschooled. My parents made all the accommodations for me and my siblings to be able to do the regular schoolwork. And, there was never really another option to go be around blind people. And in a sense, I think that was really a good opportunity for me and my siblings because you see a lot of parents of kids with disabilities tend to coddle them, and the whole life is centered around their disability. Obviously, disability is a huge part of our lives, but it doesn't fully define who we are. So for me, I grew up being treated like a sighted kid, and I grew up in a sighted world. And I think that really let me adapt to everything going around me and see the world a little bit differently. And then when I was older and I was able to come into the blind world, then I was able to embrace that side and have a whole new experience. So I'm really grateful for both sides to be able to have grown up as a sighted kid, even though I was blind, and then to be immersed in the blind world later.
You talked about hearing the cricket ball and how that really engaged you. Now, for people who are not aware of blind cricket, there are several different kinds of disability cricket. There's physical disability cricket, there's hearing impaired cricket, there's visual disability or blind cricket, and they have different formats. And one of the things that's unique about visually impaired cricket or blind cricket is the ball is specially designed and it has basically it kind of rattles. It
Yeah.
makes a much more distinct sound. And it's the concept is basically that when the ball is bowled or sent down the wicket, it's supposed to rattle enough that you're able to judge how and when to hit the ball based on the rattling and the closer it gets to you. So take us through that part of how blind cricket and the rules for blind cricket and just the ball itself is different and how that helps draw you into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I really love about blind cricket, it is so much like mainstream cricket that when our team was practicing for the World Cup, we would have people come up and watch us playing, have no idea we were blind, then we would walk off the pitch and pick up our white canes, and then everybody's going, "Wait, these people are blind. How are they just playing cricket?" Because it just looks so much alike. So for us, we use the main adaptation is the ball itself. So it's a hard plastic ball with metal ball bearings, so it rattles very loudly when it's in motion. Now, when it gets thrown up into the air, it goes quiet because of the centrifugal force. It affects the sound and it goes quiet. So that's why when we bowl underarm, and the ball has to hit the ground at least halfway down the pitch so that it's then rolling and making sound before it reaches the batsman. And so that's the big adaptation is that ball rattling and the way we bowl it so that we have enough time to hear it before we hit it. And then everything else about the game is largely the same. We have, all the same number of players, everybody's spread out on the field the same way. We just have to rely a lot more on communication. So if I'm bowling the ball, I can't see where the wicket is. I can't see where the batsman is. So the keeper, their job is to call out to me. And so I'll say keeper sound and they'll go keeper, keeper, keeper. And then I can line up and I know based on their sound exactly where I need to bowl the ball. And same thing when you're fielding, you have to shout out to each other if you're going for a ball so you don't have collisions. You're always shouting out to each other, talking to each other. And so essentially it's very reliant on the communication between the members.
there are several other adaptations in the rule, and one of the things I find it makes me laugh when you talk about the communication and when you're bowling and the ball goes into play and you're shouting out bowler or keeper keeper. That's something I've tried to emphasize to fully sighted people in terms of the importance of communication and
Yeah.
throwing to a certain end. And if it's a relay from the boundary, to shout out if there's a cutoff fielder, implementing a cutoff fielder like you would have in baseball to get the throw halfway from the boundary, and then the cutoff fielder can then relay it further to either the bowler or the keeper. And just to shout bowler, or if the fielder is running out to collect the ball towards the boundary and he's got his back to the
Right.
center of play, you want to be able to shout out to him,
Yeah.
bowler, keeper, just to speed up the decision making process so that he doesn't have to take an extra half second to turn, look, and figure out, oh, where's my best chance of getting the ball in? And yet, Abby, it's a very hard thing to get across and get people to learn from a young level, even up to adult level, that some people are stubborn in the ways and those kind of things that I grew up in other sports, principally baseball, where you would have a series of signals that would be called out. And it wasn't just the right fielder relaying it into the second baseman or the first baseman who's the cutoff fielder, whoever's the captain of the infield, if it's the shortstop who's got the best view, he's not shouting catcher, third or second when they might be shouting code words. They might be shouting Austin or Boston or Philly or whatever to not give away where the throw is going to eventually come so that the team that's running the bases is not getting clued into what the strategy
Yeah.
is. All these sorts of things
Yeah.
are things that should be happening in cricket, not always happening. And I'm curious hearing you talk about this and the emphasis on communication and obviously why it's so essential. Do you have code words or other words that you come up with to try and get the communication across within your teammates, or is it just basic language in terms of bowler, keeper, or anything else that would be just standard cricket language when you're trying to communicate what things are happening?
Yeah, I mean for the main part, we usually use regular terms because it's going to be pretty obvious to the other team which end you're calling them into because we're going based off of the sound, not the actual. So if they were, choosing a word instead of bowler or keeper, we're throwing the ball in based on where their sound is coming from. So the other team is going to know exactly which end we're going to try to be getting the ball to. And so for since we rely so much on location of the sound, we don't really have to use code words because it's pretty plain what we're communicating. The only thing we'll use, I don't think this is a thing in mainstream cricket, maybe it is, but we picked this up from the Aussies, is barbecue. And that's where you'll have one batsman hold one crease, the other, and wait for the other one to run and reach that crease, and then the first one will run across to the other side. We call that barbecuing. And that's something that we stole from the Aussies. So when we're doing that, we'll just shout barbecue, and then the other team has no idea what we're doing, unless it's the Aussies we're playing against, and then we change the word. But I would say that's the only code word that we've ever used.
Now, on the batting side, one of the other rules in blind cricket, you can have a runner. So the
Correct.
person who's striking the ball is not necessarily going to be running down the wicket. The non-striker is going to be running, but the person who's on strike may or may not be running. Is the striker always have a runner who runs the runs for them, or is it based on the specific individual and their level of impairment visually?
Yeah, so we have what's called sight classifications on the team. So we have B1 is fully blind and they wear blackout shades. So they can't see anything at all, even if they have a little bit of residual vision, but it's not really usable in the sport. They play in the B1 category and they wear the shades. B2 players can see up to 2 meters. They have some usable vision. And then B3 players can see up to 6 meters. So they have the most vision on the team. So B1 players, who are the fully blind ones, always have a runner because when you're running down the wicket, you don't want to have collisions, anything like that. So you always make sure B1s always have a runner. B2s can choose to have a runner because some, like I'm a B2, but I have very, very low vision for a B2. So as my vision degenerates, I will likely soon start needing to have a runner. B3s cannot choose to have a runner because they have the most vision, so they have to do the running. But runners are always members of your team. They're all blind. They're just less blind than who they're running for. So we never pull runners that are sighted or off the team. It's always from that playing 11 in the batting lineup. When, as the captain, as I'm trying to decide the batting lineup, I have to pick who's batting when, but also I have to pick who's running when, giving people breaks between, stuff like that. So it's a very complex process in the sense of lining up the batting order with runners.
If you're watching a broadcast, when they introduce a new batter coming to the crease, they'll put their name on the screen and then they'll also put in the parentheses B1, B2, or B3 so that the people watching the broadcast are informed of the classification for what you're referring to.
Yeah.
The degree of visual impairment so that it is understood, all right, if it's a B1, they're going to be coming to the crease with a runner versus a B2 or B3 won't necessarily be the case.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious that's on the batting side. On the fielding side, this also is consequential. I'm curious, especially from your perspective, because you captained the USA women's team at the Blind World Cup. How do you arrange your fielding alignment to take into context and consideration the different classifications of people on your starting 11 so that you're not putting a B1 fielder in a position where there might be a safety issue or they're just not going to be as sharp at reacting to a ball when it comes into play versus somebody who is a B2 or B3 who is not as impaired and will have a better sense of how to react to a ball that's hit in their direction.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is people tend to really underestimate RB1 players. So it is true that the more vision you have, the more you're able to see the ball coming and react. But sometimes, definitely, RB1s are so tuned into the sound of the ball that they are just as capable of slamming down and blocking those balls. So as B1s, usually B1s and then as a B2 as well, we'll throw our bodies down on the ground and we'll use our whole length of our body to block the ball because it's usually coming down across the ground. And so for our B1s, they'll throw their bodies down and block the balls, and they do a really, really good job of getting those balls and getting them back in. So definitely, like they are just as key in the fielding as everyone else is. But we match everything very strategically when we do the fielding because all of us, regardless of vision level, we're still all blind. So we lose the ball. Like it gets hit out there, and once it stops rolling, it goes quiet. So if we lose the ball, I always, as I'm setting up the field, try to spread out those with more vision so that if the ball goes quiet, they're close enough to other fielders to be able to run in, see where the ball is, and grab it. So I try to spread out the vision as much as possible in that sense so that if the ball goes quiet, we can back each other up and help each other find the ball. And then, yeah, I definitely, from that, it really depends on who's got the best arm, who's going to be able to throw it in farther, who am I going to put towards the boundary. All the same considerations you would have for mainstream cricket. I'm just making sure we're kind of spreading around the vision if the ball goes quiet.
Bowling, you said before, it's got to be underarm.
Correct.
And most of the footage that I've seen, it's similar to your traditional 10 pin bowling where the ball is basically rolling along the ground for the entire way. I know you said it's got to bounce halfway and then it continues on further, but essentially the principal shot or the foundational shot that you're seeing people play in blind cricket is basically 99% of the time they're playing a sweep shot or what would
Correct.
traditionally be considered a sweep shot in able-bodied cricket.
Mhm.
Looking at some of the footage, and I'm seeing a disparity. There are some bowlers who are really zinging it in there underarm, and then there are others who are floating it in, and it's coming much slower. And so obviously that means something different in terms of the speed and how often you're hearing the ball rattle. So how do you arrange your bowling lineup in terms of balancing it out between the quote unquote fast bowlers in blind cricket versus a slow bowler, a traditional spin bowler? Is it heavily weighted one way or another, or do you find that there's one form of bowling in that way that's more advantageous to you as fielding side, or that you find more difficult to face as a batter based on the repetition or the sequencing of the rattle as it's approaching you?
Yeah, I would say as far as picking the bowling lineup, so you have to have at least 8 of the 20 overs have to be bowled by the fully blind players. So that's always a factor as I'm figuring out my bowling lineup. I'm switching people out to make sure I'm keeping in that quota, making sure I'm meeting that requirement. But other than that, it really, as a captain, I kind of take it as I go and I see a big thing is where I'm pulling people from the field because if someone, we're all blind. So it takes sometimes a bit more time to get to the wicket to start bowling. And so if I think strategically, I have to think about where everybody is on the field, and I'll usually pull someone to bowl who's closer to that side, who has another person there who can help them get where they're going to cut that time down because it can be very time consuming to be running all the way across the field when we're having to use calls to direct each other. So that's a big part that plays into it. And then as far as the bowling, you really try to match. This is a skill that I need to get a lot better at, but trying to match the bowler to the batsman. So if I have a batsman who's super powerful, has a lot of vision, they're able to see those fastballs coming in and they're hitting them, then there's the extra power from the bowling that's just making those balls go crazy. So I might put a slower bowler in there just to allow, there's less power coming in towards the batsman, less power coming off the bat. Whereas if I have someone who, like myself, I really enjoy hitting slow balls because it lets me get a perfect angle because I can't see super well, but when it's slow enough, I can get a good angle and hit it exactly where I want it. So it really depends. I kind of see how the bowlers are doing against the different batsmen and plan based on that who I'm going to throw in. And then based on, of course, accuracy and stuff like that, lefty, righty. So a lot of it's pretty similar to mainstream for sure. You do a lot of changes on the fly. And it can be challenging as a blind captain I can't see who's where on the field, so I have to keep it all jumbling in my head. So my vice captain is amazing. We would, every night before the matches, we would stay up and sort out the exact field placements. We had to have everything mapped out in our heads because I didn't have enough vision to actually see it live on the field.
In fully able-bodied cricket, the umpires communicate at the start of each over, bowler coming in, right arm over the wicket, or right arm around the wicket, or left arm over the wicket, left arm around the wicket. How much communication, whether just from the normal introduction of bowler classification like you would have in the other kinds of cricket, versus any extra level of communication that the umpires offer or communicate to help the participating players understand what's happening in terms of the bowler or also the batter who's on strike? Do the umpires say left hand bat on strike or right hand bat on strike
I
or
would
anything like that? Or do they do offer any other additional assistance as umpires in the context of the players on the field, or is the umpiring pretty much as you would get in a fully able cricket match?
I would say it really depends from ump to ump. It's varies from who you're working with, but as a general rule, it's pretty much the same as a regular umpire. When you go up to bowl, you'll tell the umpire how you're bowling, and then they announce it down to the batsman. Some of the umpires will announce, like if you're bowling, obviously I can't, if I bowl, I can't see if it went wide, and I can't see the umpire's signal if it went wide. So the umpires will usually call out if it was wide or a no ball, things like that. But not all of them do. Sometimes, I'll just ask, hey, can you let me know? Or my keeper will let me know down on the other end if she's, sure if it was wide or not. So in that sense, they give us a little indication of our bowling, but other than that, they don't do much communication. We do have when there's the umpire out on square, if we have a batsman who's fully blind, obviously they need an assigned runner. So they're not running when they're off strike. So when they're off strike, they go out and the umpire that's at square just calls them out and gives them that cue to come out to where they're standing. So they give that vocal cue as well. But otherwise, it's all the same as mainstream.
One of the things that stands out as well in terms of the fielding is the number of runouts, and it's not just because the ball is hit to specific fielders or the batters are confused because one batter who might be a B1 and is working with a runner, the communication is off, and the non-striker thinks there's a run and there's not a run. It's not just the confusion between the wickets. More impressively, the fielding. There's a lot of direct hits. The fielders that you see in blind cricket, they're athletic and they can throw. And even if their vision is reduced or impaired, the fielding is still incredibly athletic and stuff you would see in a normal cricket match. What to you is the reason that you think that the fielding standards are generally pretty sharp in blind cricket matches?
I would say fielding is obviously a super important part of the sport. So for our team personally, we had our coach from Australia when we had our training camps in October before the World Cup. He did a lot of drills with us where he would have the wicket and call, he'd be the keeper and call to us, and we would have to be way out in the field and throwing the ball in and trying to hit the wicket based off of where he is located, his sounds as he's calling keeper, keeper, keeper. So we did a lot of drills surrounding being able to grab the ball, turn around. You're grabbing the ball, but you're also then turning around and having to orient yourself without being able to see anything on the field to where the keeper is. So we did a lot of practice of running out, grabbing the ball, turning around, listening to the cues, and then throwing it in. And I think those drills are super important to any blind cricket team to sharpen that up. And then I think the communication too, because you have to all shout out to each other who's getting the ball. If you lose the ball, you have to call out and ask for help, things like that. So again, that's a huge part of it. And then also the strategy of how you place the field. So you have, if I know there's two players who communicate really well together, I'm going to put them together so that they can cover an area really efficiently, and just spreading it out in that sense. So it's very much something that a lot of time and practice is put into. And I think our girls love diving for the balls. All of us on the team, most of us really like to dive for the balls. And like I said, it's not the same as mainstream cricket. Usually the balls are coming off the ground off the bat. So we dive on the ground and block the balls. And there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion behind it, which definitely carries us a long way.
In terms of the boundary dimensions, it looks like they are somewhat reduced. What are the standard boundary dimensions in a blind cricket match compared to a non-blind cricket match?
For women's, the we usually have 35 to 40 yards is the boundary.
And do you play on a regulation pitch 22 yards, or is the pitch length reduced in any way?
We play on the same. We usually play on mainstream cricket pitches. It's the same length, 22 yards.
What to you was the most challenging thing about adapting to cricket, plain and simple, whether it was for the visually impaired aspect of the sport or just learning a new sport from scratch, plain and simple?
I think as far as actual skills, I think for me, it was a bit challenging to get into the bowling. So initially, I didn't enjoy bowling just because I didn't find the right rhythm for it. So we do standing bowling and bowling with run up. So I started doing standing bowling, just wasn't the biggest fan of it, didn't really get into it. But then I started doing a bigger run up and kind of altering, playing around with different stuff, and realized I have much more vision in my left eye. So if I run up from around the wicket, then I have a better shot at lining up. And that definitely helped. So for me, troubleshooting that bowling technique was a big challenge for me. But once I did, it was so rewarding. And now that's my favorite part of the sport. And then I would say, as far as learning the sport itself, there's a lot to learn. And people who grow up with cricket, they're used to it from a young age. And so when they try to teach people who've never played cricket before about the sport, they tend to info dump and it's super confusing and everybody's frustrated. The people trying to learn the sport are like, this makes no sense. The people trying to teach it are like, why don't these Americans understand? So I think it's definitely a challenge to learn when there can be kind of a bit of frustration built up around the understanding of the sport. So for me, I learned just by playing the sport, and I learned that was the best way to teach it to new people. Instead of trying to explain the whole sport, just getting them bowling, batting, playing, and then slowly introducing those other elements. But it's a lot to learn all the different rules when you don't grow up with it.
There's a whole can of worms you just opened up that I want to go back through. One more question going back to the classifications. I've got a friend who is the captain of the England physical disability cricket team, Callum Flynn. And when he has played for the England PD team, they've got different categories of classifications and what that constitutes in terms of a point system. Somebody's got it one leg, or they might have a deformed hand or something like that. It constitutes different points in terms of the criteria, and they have to meet a combined points threshold in terms of how they form the starting 11. When you talked about the B1, B2, B3 classifications, I would imagine you're not going to come across too many teams where all 11 players are B1 classified players. I suppose it could happen, but it would be rare. Is there any sort of combined threshold where there's a minimum or a maximum number of B1, B2, B3 that form a starting 11 in a match?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a minimum four out of the 11 have to be fully blind. Could be more, but at least four of the playing 11 have to be B1. And then no more than four of the playing 11 can be B3. So a lot of times you'll see the 4-3-4 pattern where you have four fully blind, three who are middle B2 players, and then four that are B3. On our team, we're very B2 heavy, so we usually have four of the B4s, and then the rest of the team is made up mostly of B2s. We only have one B3 on our team. So for us, that's a little bit different, but you definitely see you have to have runners. So that's why, unfortunately, we can't have only B1 team because we need runners in the sport. Of course, it could be adapted to be played differently, but on the international level, you have to have at least some B2 players to do the running bit. But there's no requirement to have B3 players. There's no requirement to have B2 players. You have to have those minimum requirements met.
Essentially, you could have nine B1s and you would need at least two B2s or B3s, is what it sounds like, in order to fulfill the running requirement for
Correct.
players. But in the same sense, you could, in theory, have the same person be a runner the entire innings for different players. It's not as if the person who opens the batting is a B1, they get out. Whoever is running for them now is no longer eligible to run for the next player who comes out to bat. They can keep running for their teammates
Correct.
if the situation requires it or demands it.
Yep, absolutely. And if we've got a good partnership going out on the pitch and one of the batsmen gets out, sometimes we'll have that batsman stay out there as a runner so that they're still out there with that partnership. And then we'll bring in another player that they're running for. But we definitely, you could have a player that's just running for all the other players the whole time. We just try to give people rest, cycle people out. Because it gets to be a lot with all of the running back and forth, obviously. So we try to cycle out because the people who are running are also batting. So those of us who are runners get very, very exercised.
But you introduced the strategic element there. So it could be a case of somebody who's a B2 or B3 opens the batting, gets out in the seventh or eighth over. But if they're in a good rhythm, a good flow of the game, if a B1 player enters at number three, you might want to keep the person who just got out as the runner for them rather than taking somebody who's cold off the bench and have them try and start running.
Yeah. And of course, it depends on how fresh the runner is, how intense the match has been so far. But that's definitely a strategy if you've got a good partnership going out in the middle to try to keep those runners out there.
Because if they've got that rapport, that chemistry with the person they've been batting with for the first seven or eight overs, the running between the wickets, if again it's a new B1 who comes out, it would still be the same two players running together who had been batting for that opening partnership.
Correct.
So there is that strategic element. Okay.
Mhm.
I want to go back to the can of worms that you just opened up with it in regards to how to learn all the aspects and nuances of cricket. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody that the Stars and Stripes Cricket Podcast is brought to you by Sportsnection, the home of the first ever U.S. cricket trading card set, the Stars and Stumps series. Head to sportsnection.com to get your hands on limited edition items, including autographed cricket trading cards from up-and-coming USA men's stars such as Sai Mukamala, Sanjay Krishnamurti, Mohammad Mohsin, and Shubham Ranjane. Stars and Stripes Cricket Podcast listeners can use coupon code PDP2026 at checkout to get 20% off any online order. That's coupon code PDP2026. Sportsnection is not only American owned, but their cards are printed in the US of A, in the great state of Illinois. That's near Abby's neck of the woods in Wisconsin. Once again, that's Sportsnection, uniting athletes and fans through trading cards. One of the things I found very, very attention getting when I met you in San Francisco, Santa Clara, Abby, was the fact that you said not only were you new to cricket, but I believe all but one member of the team that went to India for the Women's Blind Cricket World Cup in November were all from what would be characterized as non-traditional cricket backgrounds. So
Correct.
people who are not of the South Asian, Indian, Pakistani diaspora, people who are not from the West Indian diaspora, ethnic communities. I think it was 13 out of the 14 or 14 of the 15. You can correct me how many players went on tour, but essentially all but one were from backgrounds outside of that. So whether that's white, Hispanic, Asian, as in East Asian, we're talking Japanese, Korean, Black community that's not from the Caribbean, Afro-Caribbean community. that's where you drew your playing base from. And so it wasn't just you who was new to the sport. You founded the Cricket Association for the Blind USA in 2024, and everybody who was recruited essentially were people who had no concept of cricket, in addition to having to overcome the obstacle of the visual impairment. You talked about all the things that make cricket difficult as a newcomer to the sport, whether it's the terminology or other aspects of the game that it doesn't really share common bonds with too many other sports in America. So, what was the recruitment process like in terms of convincing people to get involved in cricket as a blind participation sport and to get them involved as a selling point of, hey, you can represent USA and you can go to a World Cup and represent USA?
Yeah, so I'll quickly just I want to correct the one detail. We have one player who's from India and one who's from Trinidad and Tobago. So both of them had some cricket knowledge background, but then the other 14 of us did not. So we have Latina, Spanish, African American, Caucasian, Native American, huge blend from all over, but it very much reflects the US demographic. We're a blended team, but 2 out of 16 of us were the only ones that had that background. So for us, as we were recruiting, so this was my brother, Drew Finklea, and I started recruiting in January of 2025. And it came about because I got introduced to the sport, wanted to learn more. So my brother and I went to India and we learned the sport. He did a lot of volunteer work. There's an organization called Samarthanam Trust for the Disabled based out of India. And they were really keen to see cricket grow in the US, particularly blind cricket. So they invited us to come to India, and I got to train with them, some members of the Indian men's team and women's team there. And they taught me how to play blind cricket. And then Samarthanam really wanted to see it grow here in the US, and me and my brother did as well. So Drew and I were the men on the ground doing the recruitment, and then Samarthanam was providing the funds and networking connections to be able to get across the country and do what we needed. So what we did from January through June, I guess January through May, was we just traveled nonstop. We were barely ever home, and we were just flying from city to city. We were going to schools for the blind, some of the institutes where all the students are blind, visually impaired, and we would teach the students how to play the sport. And we didn't teach them the complexities of the sport, because that's where people aren't interested in learning. They don't know about cricket. They would come in, they'd say, I don't want to play cricket. I want to play goal ball. I want to play beat baseball. And then rather than sitting them down and giving them a breakdown of how the game worked, we just said, you're going to bat, you're going to bowl, here's the technique. And then once they were invested and they were throwing balls, hitting balls, they were having a blast. And then they wanted to know actually how the game worked. And we found that was the most effective strategy, because you have to give people a reason to care about cricket. You can't just expect, just because you love cricket, that doesn't mean people who didn't grow up with it are going to care at all about cricket. They have their sports that they like. So until they play it, until they fall in love with it, they're not going to have a reason to care. So Drew and I just traveled from school to school. We went to conferences for the blind, training centers for the blind, and we just put bats and balls in people's hands. And I think where the real magic came from is, like me growing up, I didn't have access to blind sports. It was something, there's so many people that live in small towns, they live in rural areas, and they don't have blind sports where they're at. So when we came in, they didn't know anything about cricket, but they got to try it. They loved it. They had an amazing experience. And we told them, you might not have a blind sport in your area, but we'll bring you out to training camps. We'll teach you cricket, and then you can go to the World Cup if you make it onto the team. And that was, we got a very special brand of woman, because it takes a lot of courage to say, I don't know anything about this sport, but I'm going to make a whole bunch of personal sacrifices on time, job, school, to go out and learn the sport and try to go to the World Cup after 5 months of training. So we got a lot of very courageous women on our team, and they were there for the opportunity, there for playing the sport when they didn't have the opportunity before.
It's something that I hope anybody who's watching or listening to this can grasp, that this is not something that should be unique to your experience. You used the word info drop before,
Yeah.
and I love that. I think it's incredible way to describe it. The experience that I've had, and I know that you say that you've had and other people have had, where people in the cricket community are very enthusiastic, very passionate about cricket, and they want to get that passion across. And sometimes it doesn't happen in the best way. And what happens, and this happened to me, it happened to you, it's happened, I'm sure, to plenty of other people. Cricket enthusiasts get so wrapped up in the minutia of wanting to teach their sport, and it's almost as if they embrace and want to hype up how complicated it is.
Yeah.
They want to make it sound more
Yeah.
difficult. Yes, you're,
So true. So true. Yeah, and I don't think it's intentional, but you have this pride in your sport that you grow up with. And you take great pride in that and you want to teach other people about it, but you also want them to appreciate the complexity. So I feel like some people kind of show off a little bit of, well, this is how cricket works. Oh, you don't understand? It's very much, I don't think it's intentional.
yeah, and you kind of hinted at it. In some ways, I feel like there's a little bit of condescension at times that comes out like, "Oh, you don't understand? Of course you don't understand, because cricket is just that awesome and that amazing that only somebody of a higher level of intellect would understand the nuances and complexities of cricket." That kind of attitude, and it irritated the hell out of me. And when I see it and witness it in other people, I just roll my eyes and I think like, "You idiot, you're ruining it. You're ruining it. How is this meant to welcome people in and make them feel hospitable and like they should be participating in a sport when you're talking down to them and making them feel like it's out of reach and
Right.
they'll never learn because oh, only the sharpest mind could fully grasp what I'm trying to teach because cricket is the greatest sport ever and blah blah. And everybody thinks their sport is the greatest sport ever, but what I find frustrating from that standpoint is all the other sports that try to get the message across that their sport is quote quote the greatest sport ever, the majority of them try to dial it down and keep it at its basic level and its simplest level and make it have a common bond or a commonality that anybody can share in and take part in. It's supposed to be a universal experience. Whereas cricket, I've always felt the easiest way to get the point across of cricket and why it's fun. And I've always used this, and then I have to think about, oh, maybe I need to alter what I say because now we're dealing with blind cricket and it's a different experience. But the common phrase is it's a see the ball, hit the ball game. And it shouldn't be more complicated than that. You don't need to be teaching somebody the LBW law in the first 5 minutes of meeting them, right? You don't need to explain what a leg by is in the first 10 minutes and all that other stuff. At its essence, what you said, I think, is so hugely influential for the people who are first timers, whether it's somebody who's visually impaired or not. The visceral experience of physically just having a bat and a ball placed in their hand. I can't tell you how many people that when I've tried to introduce them to cricket, I always make the comparison that, hey, when I take salt and pepper shakers and forks and knives and spoons and try to diagram them on the kitchen table and explain cricket that way, it goes way over everybody's heads. But
Yeah.
the second I put a bat and ball into somebody's hand and they can physically feel it and grasp it, and it's tangible all of a sudden, and it's not an abstract concept. And then when I take him out, not even to a cricket field, I'll take him to a tennis court, any place where I can get a flat surface that's with a little bit of open space and say, here, I'm just gonna throw the cricket ball at you. I'm not gonna bowl it. I'm not gonna do the proper. I just want you to hit the ball, feel the ball, come off the bat, have the bat in your hands, and the second somebody hits a cricket ball for the first time, feeling the bat in their hand, they're like, "Whoa, this is
This
kind
is
of
fun.
cool." Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think going back to what you were saying about kind of the attitude people have towards people learning cricket, I think definitely there are people like that. I have run into that, but there's a lot of people that also just don't know how to explain it because when you grow up with something so embedded in your life, you can't even think of how would you break it down to someone that knows nothing about it. So you run into those people that are a little bit snooty about it, but there's also people who just don't know how to teach it. And I think that's something that should be focused on as people are trying to explain cricket is really think about simple ways to teach it. And I come from an education background, so I'm really used to breaking things down and approaching it in unconventional ways. But really the essence of it is just get people having fun with it. And then slowly, like you were saying, just throwing a ball at them, having them hit it. They don't need to know that they should run after they hit the ball. They don't need to know all the rules of batting. They don't need to have wickets out, anything like that. Once they start having fun with it, then you start introducing and they'll actually want to learn. And I think that's by far the most powerful way to teach any sport.
Again, to follow up on what you said, the articulation of the game. That's one of the biggest challenges. How do people articulate it? How do you get somebody to want to get exposed to it if the articulation of the sport is being done in a way that becomes an obstacle? And part of the reason why I feel like there is such a challenge that a lot of people have in the cricket community in terms of articulating the sport to people outside of cricket is, again, one of the other things we talked about. The language that's used in cricket, the majority of it is very unique to cricket. If you
Hmm.
think about other sports, just a positional word like guard or forward, you've got guards in football. You've got guards in basketball. Now, they might mean different things. You've got a point guard or a shooting guard, and in football, you've got a left guard, right guard on the offensive line. But there's some shared language. You've got a forward in basketball, a forward in soccer. You've got a forward in ice hockey. Things as simple as that. Cricket really doesn't have that shared terminology. And so everything is so unique about it. And I think that also contributes to the challenge in terms of how do you articulate a sport? How do you articulate just literally the basic words that are used in the sport when nobody recognizes these words across any other sports fundamentals? And then that challenge of being able to articulate it progresses and it becomes an even bigger set of hurdles that you've got to clear because then all the other elements of it that you and I have talked about, that becomes a compounding challenge. And then you overwhelm people to the point where then they're like, oh, all I wanted to do was have fun, to your point, Abby. And this isn't fun. The info drop is killing my enjoyment and I want to run as far away from as possible.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's just trying to contextualize it for people because no, there might not be a keeper in other sports. It's different, but you can say it's kind of like a catcher in baseball. They're standing behind the bats and stuff like that. Or, fielders. We have fielders in so many sports. Runners, or I guess runners is kind of particular to blind cricket, but like batsman, bowler, things like that. So even if we use a little bit of a different term too, we can try to connect it to things that people already understand, like a catcher in baseball, for example. And then that makes it easier, even if they don't understand the terms we're using, we start drawing connections between what they already know and cricket, and then it starts becoming a lot simpler to understand.
Now, one of the other things that I feel like would be a huge recruitment mechanism for cricket, when I say before about it's a see the ball, hit the ball game, and all you want to do is just put a bat and a ball in somebody's hands and let them feel it. The other thing, and I feel like this would be even more enhanced in blind cricket, one of the things that got me so excited is somebody who's always loved fielding in baseball and the impact that fielding can have on a sport or just the defensive principles of any sport, whether I love defense in football and defense in ice hockey and all that. The visceral sound of hitting the stumps when I'm in the field and I hit the stumps and it's a run out, or if you're a bowler and you hit the stumps and you bowl somebody out, the instant gratification and the instant thrill that you get, the instant feedback that you
Yeah.
get when you hear the sound of the stumps, you know it's unmistakable. And when I've introduced people to cricket in that way too, it's not just the batting and trying to hit the ball, but people who might be challenged in terms of trying to figure out how to grip the bat properly or how the technique would be to hit the ball and why it's not going as far or as powerfully as it would in a certain way. If they can't get that, at the very least, they can get hitting the stumps because at the end of the day, you don't have to explain, oh, you got to throw the ball this way or there's two sets of stumps or this, that. If you just break it down to as simple as target practice, if you've done target practice literally in any other sport in your life, you aim for a target, whether it's a goal in ice hockey or a goal in soccer, or you're aiming for a base in baseball and the fielder who's standing over the base, or the strike zone, quote, quote. In baseball, the strike zone is always been an imaginary kind of floating target, and the strike zone isn't the same for each player because the strike zone is meant to be from the numbers to the knees. And if you've got somebody who's 6'8" versus 5'4", the numbers to the knees means something very different. The strike zone is not equivalent. It's kind of an abstract concept, whereas there's nothing abstract about the stumps. The stumps are the stumps, no matter if
Yep.
somebody's 6'8" or 5'4". And if you like target practice, then you should love the fielding aspect of cricket and just being able to hit the stumps. And if your bowler hit the stumps that way, and there's no interpretation needed, you get that instant feedback. And I'm curious for you or for any of your teammates, when that aspect of the game was first introduced to you, hitting the stumps and hearing the ball hit the stumps, what was your reaction and what impact did that have in terms of drawing you more into the game?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely very, very gratifying because you know that you hit it dead on, and that is proof of the all the work you put into it. So our coach would have us line up into two lines, and we would be doing fielding practice, and whoever was able to hit the most wickets in a short amount of time, was the winner. So that really got the whole team hyped up about it, and it's really gratifying. In blind cricket, we use metal stumps that ding loudly when you hit them so that it's easier for us to hear. So when we hear that ding, it's like a yes, we whether we're bowling, whether we're fielding, that's just like that magical moment of I got it, I did it. So definitely it's a very gratifying feeling when you hit the stumps.
I just learned something else new. So the stumps themselves are slightly different so that the sound is different.
Correct. Yeah. So it's instead of your typical wicket, it's a metal contraption, a metal wicket, and the bail is attached on the top. So instead of the bail falling off, it's you're aiming for is to hit the wicket, and it's just staked into the ground, and it makes a really loud ding when the ball hits it. So then there's no doubt, like we can't see exactly where the ball hits, and there's never any doubt, did it miss it, did it hit? We can hear when it hit. So that's how we do it for blind cricket.
I want to go back to the early part of your life. Now, you are a B2 player, you said.
Yeah.
So you grew up, you had two older siblings. You've got three older siblings total, but two of them were blind. And you said to me earlier off air that you started to lose your vision at age 6. That's when it was diagnosed, and this is a degenerative condition. And so
Correct.
then now there are people who are part of blind cricket who've been blind their whole lives. You're not one of them. You started off with vision and it's gradually deteriorated over the course of your life. How has that contributed to the way you are approaching, I guess, cricket in general, knowing that it's going to continue to deteriorate and how that impacts your life in cricket and your life broadly outside of cricket?
Yeah, I would say I'm fortunate. A lot of people think it's really depressing to have a degenerative eye disease because eventually you're going to go blind. I think of it much more positively in the sense of it gives me time to adjust. So there's so many people that go from being sighted to fully blind and they don't have that adjustment period. So for me, I have the opportunity, I gradually lose it. As I lose vision, I'm able to then adapt to sports or life in general, whatever I'm doing. So yes, I feel the vision loss. I can tell I'm losing vision, but it also gives me that opportunity to adapt. And I feel like that's really helped me with my navigation, with my cricket skills, because I've had that opportunity. So for me, it is, I'm now, I mentioned earlier, bowling was challenging for me at first. Now I'm obsessed with bowling, and I'm obsessed with my run up and all of that, perfecting that style, that skill. So once I go fully blind and I'm playing under shades, I'm not going to be able to do that full run up because keeping track of where I am, where the wicket, all those things, it's just not as practical. So B1s usually do, a 2 or 3 step run up or standing bowling. So that's definitely going to be a big transition for me, but it's something that I'm willing to accept because I don't have any issue playing as a B1. I'm still playing on my team. I'm still with my girls doing my thing, having a good time. So I feel fortunate to have that time to transition into that.
Now, your brother Drew, who is fully sighted, he's not blind. He was somebody who has been instrumental in also helping out with the formation of Cricket Association for the Blind USA and part of the journey with you to help get the team to the World Cup. Your other two siblings, since your involvement with Drew, have they taken up an interest in cricket?
Not terribly much. No, my brother is interested in. We started the women's team first, which has never happened. All the other blind cricket countries have always started the men's first. A lot of them don't even have women's teams. So we decided to start with the women because we really wanted to give them that opportunity and get them into the World Cup. So I've stepped back from the management for Cricket Association for the Blind USA. So I'm no longer part of that, driving that. But this year they're planning to start the men's team. So my brother is keen to try out for that. He'll play cricket with me. He practices with me. My sister, not so much. She's not as much into sports, but she's very into, following the matches, seeing what we're doing, and super supportive, which is really nice to have.
In what ways were you able to bond with the other players as you're recruiting them and as they're getting involved in cricket? You also obviously have this common bond that you share. That's why you're all able to be part of this team specifically. But How do you bond with them in other ways over the course of the process of forming this team and being part of that World Cup journey?
I would say, I don't know if I've ever experienced anything in my life that's been quite so magical and like shaping of me as a person as connecting with the other women on the team. It really is, we have something more than cricket bringing us together. We all have the shared experience of blindness and how that's affected our lives. And blindness, again, doesn't define who we are, but it does affect the way the world views us. It affects the way that we view the world. So coming together, a lot of us on the team didn't have deep connections in the blind community before joining the team. So this is an opportunity for a bunch of us who've never been around other blind people for an extended amount of time to be able to connect and really understand each other in a way that, of course, sighted people can understand us, but it's very nice to be in a group of people that all have had similar lived experiences and just understand conceptually what it's like. So I think that aspect really helped us to click together very quickly as a team. But then also, because we had to learn to communicate so much because we can't see on the field, that really drew us together. And we're just fortunate to have an amazing team. Like the women on that team are, everyone is so caring and so loving and so passionate and powerful. Like it's a life changing experience to be part of the team. And I'm really grateful to all of them for making it, not every team turns out to be a dream come true, but this one really did. So super grateful to the girls on the team for making it such a magical experience.
You talked about some of the amazing stories on the team. One of them that it's on the website, there's a couple stories linked, is Anna Moss. And Anna is from Fort Worth, Texas. And in addition to having become blind, it also coincided apparently with cancer diagnosis. She had kidney cancer, she had a kidney removed. So she had a lot of things all coming at her at once. And then cricket comes into her life and she's able to go to the World Cup. Tell us a little bit more about her and her journey.
Yeah, I would say, I don't feel at liberty to speak too deeply into her personal health journey or anything like that, but I can definitely speak on her as a person. She lost her vision fairly recently before getting into cricket. So for her, vision loss was new. So it was really cool to see her come into a community of blind women and be able to have that support group. And she just embraced it so strongly. Like she fell right into place with the team and plays so she encourages everybody on the team. She's a powerhouse, and she's just a great person. So to be able to see her journey on the team has been amazing. And every single person on the team has a story like that. Everybody has worked through different things. Everybody has different experiences they're bringing to the table, and it's amazing to see.
We talked about the demographics from a cultural standpoint. The other part of Anna Moss that is in the news articles that have been published, she's married, she's got kids, and so you've got people from different stages of their personal life journey in that regard. You're a recently graduated college student, you're 22. I'm curious, just in terms of the broadness of different life experiences that the other players have in the team, whether it's again people like Anna who are married with kids, somebody like you as a college student, and also just geographically. She's from Texas, you're from Wisconsin, other parts of the country. In terms of the diversity of the team in that standpoint, aside from what we talked about, where you've got black, Latino, white, Indian players, can you describe and give some more insight into all the different cross sections that came together for this team?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something that you would expect to cause issues on the team. And you've got people in beginning of college all the way up to people who are, grandmothers. And we've got this huge range of age and life stage. We've got people in college, people who are pursuing business owners. We have a few that own their own businesses, run their own things, those that are pursuing different professional paths. And it's so varied. You would think there would be conflict in that sense of people just not getting together. And like any team, you've got different people tend to understand different people better. But we've been really fortunate. We've got the 20 something year olds mixed in with everybody else. Everybody's just mixed in and really clicks together. And it gives us an opportunity to learn about each other's lives, to care about each other's lives. And if anything, I feel like that's given more depth to our connection as a team. Whereas it very much could have been something that created division and misunderstandings and issues. Everybody made a real effort to understand everybody. And we've got people from all over the country too, Washington State, California, Delaware, literally west to east coast, all over the place. So it took a lot of dedication as we were training and planning for the World Cup for everybody to find people in their area to practice with, to get together as much as they could and play when we're so spread out. So definitely, I feel it's made us stronger as a team to be so diverse.
How old was the youngest player and how old was the oldest player in the team?
Youngest player was 19 in Malibu. She came in right at the end. We were looking for two final players to fill in our last two slots. So she came in way later than it was her and our one of our keepers, Adani. They came in super late to the game and crushed it. They had less training than everybody else, but they came in and just killed it. So that was our youngest player was 19, and then our oldest player was late 50s.
The youngest player, you said her name was Malibu,
Yeah.
and the oldest player, her name?
We have a couple that are kind of neck and neck. We got Stacy, who is our grandma. She's got a whole bunch of grandkids that all help her play cricket. And then a couple others, Marcia as well, Tina, that are all in their 50s. And just such amazing players. Just, people see these women in their 50s out there and they're like, how are you playing cricket? And then they see them get out there and they are some of our best players. So it's really cool to see that.
And then to go back to one of the other points you touched on, training in the lead up to this World Cup. You've got players spread out all over the country. You just dropped some of the states, Washington, Delaware, California, Texas, yourself in Wisconsin. Did you have pockets? I mean, if the team couldn't get together all at once, were there pockets where two or three players or four players would try to get together on a weekend in a common location? Or what was the strategy in terms of trying to get people together as often as possible, in spite of the fact that maybe you couldn't get all 16 together
Yeah.
at one point in time?
We did, when we did our initial selection camps in June, what we did was we took we looked through the applicants, picked 24 that seemed like they would be good fits, and we split them between two training camps. So we had a camp on the East Coast and one on the West Coast where we kind of evaluated everybody and then kind of select down from there. And once we'd selected those, next group of players, we did a full team training camp in July where everybody came from all over the country to one training camp and did our final selection where everybody trained together. We got to see the team dynamic and we trimmed down and made our final selections. And then in October, we did another full team training camp where we added in our last two players as well because we needed to fill those spots. So October, we did our last full team training camp. And then outside of that, a lot of the players were stuck on their own, but they really made the best of it, pulled family members into it to practice at home. Some of us are fortunate. There's three of us that live in Wisconsin, so we would get together and practice together. I'll practice with, Drew, my brother, we'll play together, or my other brother, my parents, anybody who I can get. And that's same story for the whole team. It's just finding anybody in the area who's interested, willing to play, to get that practice in, and then when we could, getting together as a full team.
When you say the last two players that you needed to add to the team, was this with regards to you needed to get two more B1 players, or was there some strategic reasoning why you needed to find two specific players to add, or was it just you were opening up the competition to give one more shot to people who might be able to contribute no matter their classification?
Yeah, we after we narrowed down at the final selection, we ended up with 14 players and we could have, 14 is acceptable, but we could have up to 16. So we wanted to pull in, again, we had such a short timeline to find people that not only were interested, but also people who could give up their whole life for a month to go to the World Cup, plus training camps before. So then after we'd done those selection trials in July and picked our top 14, then I was fortunate enough to get in touch with Malibu and Adani, who hadn't heard of the opportunity before. And so I was like, hey, you're both super athletic. You're both amazing people. I'd like you to try out for the team. And if there's cohesion, have you join us. And I'm so impressed. Like they came out in October for those training camps and just blew everybody's socks off. They were so good. So they very, very instantly, they were part of the team and added on to that final 16.
This is another thing that comes up in all cricket, not just blind cricket. You mentioned people who are able to take a month off. And this is something that's a consideration, again, for all the age range that you talked about. People who've got professional lives already well cemented versus people who are students who may or may not have flexibility depending on what their teachers or professors are willing to allow in terms of missing time, or maybe they had to take a semester off or take some time off, or if they're not taking online classes, if they were going in person, that wasn't going to be possible for them. So from that standpoint, what was the biggest obstacle you had to overcome in terms of the logistics of finding 14 or 16 people who were in a position, whether it's their work-life balance in terms of having a boss who was flexible enough to allow them to have this opportunity and was supportive of it, or a student who had professors versus the financial component of finding people who not only could get the time off, but actually had some level of disposable income that they could actually make this trip happen. Because I would imagine a lot of this was self-funded, or were you getting sponsors?
Yeah, we were actually, so I mentioned earlier, Samarthanam Trust for the Disabled, based in India, is the one who funded Drew and I to travel across the states and do the recruitment. They funded the training camps. So there's been definitely some, like, while we were at Cricket Impact Summit, they made a super generous donation. While we were there, we also got some donations from some of the cricket clubs and stuff. So we've had some outside donations as well. But the majority of the funds have come from Samarthanam Trust for the Disabled. So they fully covered the expenses for the team to get to India. So the girls didn't have to pay anything out of pocket, which was really unique because usually in blind sports you have to pay for everything to get where you're going, do what you're doing. So thankfully, Samarthanam was able to remove that barrier so that we didn't have that. But there's still the thing of you have multiple 10-day training camps leading up to the World Cup. And then for the World Cup, you're gone for a month. You're not making money during that time. So even if you can get off from work, you're going to have less money then to pay the bills because you weren't working for those several weeks of training and the World Cup.
It's
So,
the opportunity costs
yeah,
from economics, where even if you're not paying out of pocket, you're also simultaneously not earning, and
exactly.
that has its own impact.
Yeah, and it was really sad. Like we had a couple people that were interested, super athletic, super experienced in sports, and they were super keen to come out and try out for the team. And I would write letters to, we had some who were in high school, some who were in college working. I would write letters to their professors or to their bosses saying, hey, this is the opportunity. It's a World Cup, once in a life opportunity. Please let your student come. And unfortunately, we had a lot of parents who were really anxious about their kids going across the world, which is understandable. But a lot of parents, a lot of professors, and a lot of bosses that were not sold on the idea. And unfortunately, that made some of the girls not be able to go, which again really narrows down. You have to find a group of people that is good at the sport, good team cohesion, has the availability, and has the courage to jump into something like that. So the end product of players that we got was the most powerful group of women we possibly could have gotten. We had some that had to give up their jobs to be able to come out and do it. So it was a lot of people gave up a lot personally and all that just to be able to go. So super proud of them for that.
The lead up, you mentioned some of the training camps and all that. I believe you mentioned at one point in time in a previous conversation that California Cricket Academy was one of the groups that was helpful in terms of providing a practice facility where you could train, and they made that available because they were so supportive of the initiative. And for people who aren't aware, that's in Cupertino, California, in the Silicon Valley, where Apple Computers is headquartered. But California Cricket Academy traditionally has had a lot of involvement in youth cricket, grassroots cricket in the U.S. They've produced a lot of players on both the men's and women's side who have played for USA Under 19 or have gone on to play for the USA senior teams on both the men's and women's side. What was their impact and their involvement in terms of helping to make physical space available for the team to train and just be able to do anything else that made this possible?
Yeah, the big thing was we had most of our training camps. We had three separate training camps out in Cupertino, and for everyone, CCA provided the grounds for free for us, which was a huge thing. Cricket grounds are a hot commodity. There's not a lot of them out there, and when they're there, they're usually booked up and can be pretty pricey to be able to reserve. So this, CCA let us have full access for multiple training camps that took a lot of time, weekends, weekdays, and so super grateful for them for providing the facilities, and they were there if we needed anything else. So they were very supportive through the whole process.
And then from a coaching standpoint, I'm imagining that the majority of the coaches are fully sighted coaches.
We had actually one-sided coach. So we kind of had to shuffle through some different coaches to find a fit. So we were super fortunate. Samarthanam sent over two of their national players for the Indian men's blind cricket team, who are B3 players. They have a lot of vision. Most people wouldn't realize they were blind just meeting them. So the two of them, two of those players came over for our initial training camps. And then Drew was our team manager as well as co-founder. So he was heavily involved in coaching as well. And then myself, I didn't know a ton of cricket, but I knew more cricket. I was the most senior player after just a few months of playing. So just because I got into it a little bit before everybody else. So I was able to help with the coaching as well. So we had a blend for that for our initial training camps. And then for our first long training camp, we worked with a US coach who did mainstream cricket. And then we were super fortunate to be able to find an Aussie coach. He came over from Australia in October and he coached our team. He is the captain of the men's blind cricket team in Australia. So he's super experienced with coaching and cricket. And so he coached us in October, but unfortunately wasn't able to go to India with us. So then we had a South African coach who flew out and helped. So we had help from literally all over the world. It was really cool to see people coming together to help coach us and helping us trying to find that fit of a coach that worked really well with the team. And unfortunately, our Aussie coach wasn't able to join us in India because of schedule conflict. But yeah, we definitely have had our round of coaches.
But from what you're saying, it sounds like the majority of these coaches are also visually impaired.
Yeah,
And
so we have our South African coach was not, and then our one US based coach was not, but the others were all blind.
and who was the US based coach?
Chelsea Douglas. She worked with us in July. She came out and worked with us for that training camp. So super grateful for her. She does a lot of work for developing cricket and teaching youth cricket. So she's put a lot of work into that.
Yeah, I've met her many times. She's based on the East Coast. I believe she's based in New York, New Jersey, and she's heavily involved in trying to get more girls involved playing cricket. And now she's involved in blind cricket, which is fantastic that she's able to make that contribution as well in terms of all the other stuff that she's done. She's a valuable member of the U.S. cricket community. So, by all means, for people who are not aware of Chelsea Douglas, go look her up. She's out there. She's doing great things. The big question that's left unanswered, we haven't gotten to it yet. This is where I want to wrap up. How did the team do in India? Where did USA finish in the World Cup?
Well, we did not win the World Cup. Let's just say that we did not win. We won our first match that we played was against one of the regional teams. So it was one of the top state teams in India, and that was our first real match that we ever played. So first time we played against anybody but ourselves. So winning that was just an amazing experience for the team. Once we actually got into the World Cup, you could say we got a little bit slaughtered on some of our matches. We were going up against nations who'd been playing for a very long time that were very experienced, but we learned so much. So if you look at scores, we didn't do amazing. But if you look at the actual value, it was from match one to the last match, the team grew so much. Every time we played, you could just see things falling into place. So that was really cool. Just also the connection with the other countries and stuff. So performance-wise, the team grew so much, and it was just amazing to see.
I know that India played Nepal in the final,
Yes.
and USA was there.
hmm
How many teams total were in the event, and how many were there from the more established nations that you would expect, like in India, Australia, South Africa, versus the quote, quote, associate nations like a USA or Nepal?
Yeah, so we had six teams played in the World Cup. They were supposed to be seventh. Unfortunately, England was not able to make it. They were our seventh team, so we lost them. But we had Pakistan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, US, and Australia were the six teams that competed.
So USA is in pretty esteemed company. A 16 World Cup. And I mean, this is quite a big deal from the standpoint that you're pioneers. This is the first team that's ever gone to the World Cup. And not a lot of other countries have taken the time to make a commitment, whether it's financially or otherwise, in terms of resources to support an initiative like this.
Yeah,
And you had a huge role to play in a historic achievement for American cricket.
Yeah, it was an incredible journey. I owe a lot to Drew Finklea, my brother and co-founder. He's just amazing powerhouse that really drove the initiative, and then Samartha for all their funding that they provided and the coaching support and networking and all of that. And this was actually the first World Cup for women for blind cricket that's ever happened. So this was a new for everybody, first time for all the teams coming together and playing. Definitely really want to see more women's teams get formed because like I said, we're the first country to form the women's team first. And there's a lot of countries that have had men's teams for a while and they haven't started on women's teams. So definitely keen to see women's blind cricket start to grow and hope that this World Cup helped promote it and help get more people interested.
Now, how many matches did you play? Was it single round robin, double round robin? How long? I know you were in India for a month, but how many matches did you play total as part of the World Cup?
Yeah, so we played five as part of the World Cup. So we played each team leading up to the semis, and then we played one match prior to the World Cup that was with the regional team just to get our first match in and get some experience. So total we played six teams, five of which were in the World Cup.
And what has been the response been since the World Cup and you've come back to the US? Have you felt there's a greater level of awareness and have other people reached out to you? I know you said you stepped back a little bit from your roles, but just whether in an official capacity or in an unofficial capacity, have you seen an uptick in people reaching out to you to try and get involved in future USA women's blind cricket initiatives or other people who are offering sponsorship or support or anything else along these lines?
I would say, unfortunately, we weren't able to like really broadcast the match here, the matches, the World Cup here in the U.S. So it's very much family members and communities of the team members are very aware, very hyped, very excited about what happened in the World Cup. A lot of the blind community here in the U.S. wasn't super aware of it going on. They knew it was coming up, but they didn't follow along with it. We definitely have seen when we started promoting in January of 2025, nobody knew what cricket was. People weren't really interested. But by the time the summer came around, anytime we would go to speak at an event, everyone's like, oh, I want to try cricket. I've heard it's so cool. So it was really cool to see through the promotion. We saw the hype really grow. So now I'd say a lot of the mainstream blind community knows about blind cricket. A good number of them have gotten to play. We've gotten to teach over 1,500 people the basics of the sport and get them actually playing the sport. So that's been where we've really seen the hype growing. We haven't really seen a huge effect after the World Cup in that sense. But I think it gives credibility in the sense of as we're now, CABUSA is looking to form the men's team, the men can look back and say, wow, the woman did the World Cup. We can do that too. So I think it really adds credibility and more excitement to it as we bring more people into it.
What do you hope will be the greatest impact that this team and this first journey to the World Cup, and for you personally, that you hope to have in future generations of helping to grow the sport in the US?
Oh, that's a deep question there. I would say like the impact that I have personally seen over the past year on the team itself is just so much confidence boosting, so much growth as individuals. Like so many people are really shy to try new things and they feel like they're going to look stupid doing a new thing. But you had all these women that had to make the decision, I don't know anything about cricket, but I'm going to go to a national training camp and try it. And that courage really blossomed into something really powerful. And you saw, there's members of our team who have told me that before they started playing cricket, they were socially pretty shy, but now they're just loud people, excited people, exuberant people that are wearing themselves on their sleeves. They're very confident. And so I think that's my favorite thing about adaptive sports is you see these people, I teach kids adaptive sports, and when I'm working with the kids, they don't have confidence when they start a lot of times, but then once they get it, it can have a really deep impact on them long term in life. So I think giving them that healthy outlet that also boosts confidence is just life changing. So I would really like to see that grow. And cricket in specific, because cricket is a very complex sport, and you see a lot of blind sports get dumbed down. And, that doesn't mean they're not amazing sports. And I'm not talking down, like, I love all the other blind sports. But some people really, really want to play as close to the mainstream as possible. And they want that really challenging experience. And cricket gives that. So I think it allows people to push themselves to a higher level than some other options. So again, I think just the personal growth that it can have, the effect it has on people's lives is huge. So I would like to see that continue.
What was the most memorable part of your World Cup journey from the time you first got involved in all the training camps to the end of the World Cup tour itself?
That's a hard one. I would say when I first started thinking, aha, this might actually work, was when I went to a speaking event and I was talking about cricket. And I asked the audience, I said, who had heard of cricket before this year? And there was a tiny handful of people. And I was like, okay, who is familiar with it now? And almost the whole room had heard of it. And just seeing how many people had been touched by it, that was when I was like, okay, we can actually do this. This is achievable. And then when we actually started playing as a team, it shifted for me because first half of the year I was supporting, I was, promoting, but then it turned into me being part of a team. So I think our first match that we played, it wasn't in the World Cup, but our first match against the state team, the New Delhi team, that was really memorable for me because it's like all the puzzle pieces just fell into place and we felt so much like a team and everyone was just so on fire. Everyone was bantering and encouraging each other and there was just so much life on the team and that was just that moment really I feel like affected me and a lot of the team very strongly.
I hope people who are getting a chance to hear everything you're saying and watch and learn from your experiences, they get inspired and they want to get more involved because it's really incredible to discover all the things that you've been able to do over the course of the last year and a half. And whether it's people in blind cricket or any other form of cricket, there's so many things that have been eye-opening for me and just insightful for me in terms of ways that can be approached and new techniques and new philosophies and ways to go about getting people involved in cricket because as you know and I know and plenty of other people know it is such an amazing sport but the challenge is making that first step and what you said about confidence, gaining confidence, building confidence, and the impact that that can have that goes well beyond cricket. There's just so many things that can be gained, and it's just a matter of getting more people involved. And hopefully, from hearing your story, Abby, hopefully that does happen. More people do want to get involved, whether it's blind cricket, women's cricket, or any other kind of cricket, especially in America, where we need more people involved in cricket in America, Abby.
Yes, we do. And it's up to us to put the bats and balls in people's hands and give them an opportunity to fall in love with the sport, give them a reason to care about the sport before shoving it down their throats. That falls on every single person who loves cricket. It's up to us to make it appealing, not make it a scary thing.
This reminds me, I can't remember what movie it's from, if it's from Dead Poets Society or something else with Robin Williams, if it's Good Will Hunting. I think it's Dead Poets Society, but there's a scene where he's talking about you want to suck the marrow out of life without choking on the bone. And that's kind of the fine line. It's a very fine line to create. As you said, you want to get people excited, but not so excited that you're shoving it down their throat that they're choking on it and they're going, get off, get away from me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Favorite 11 time with Abey Finklea. And again, I want to remind everybody that the Stars and Stripes Cricket Podcast is brought to you by Sportsnection. Head to sportsnection.com and use coupon code PDP2026 to get 20% off any online order at checkout. Sportsnection, uniting athletes and fans through trading cards. Abby, favorite 11. Your favorite roommate on any of the cricket tours you've had.
My favorite roommate would be Caroline Carper. She is my vice captain. She's also the only roommate I've had on the team, and she is amazing. So, Caroline Carper.
Your favorite thing about blind cricket.
I have to say the woman on my team. That's my favorite thing is the experience of doing it together as a team.
Your favorite city or country that you have toured along the way of this blind cricket World Cup journey, whether it's any of the stations you've stopped at in the US for training camps or the cities that you were able to play in India. What was your favorite place that you got a chance to visit through this cricket experience?
Colombo, Sri Lanka, definitely.
Your favorite cricket ground that you've been to anywhere in the world?
That's a tough one. I would say the pitch we played on in New Delhi, and honestly, I'm terrible because I don't know the name of it, but I would have to resource that. But or the one we played during the World Cup in New Delhi. The air pollution was not my favorite part, but the pitch itself was really good in New Delhi.
Your favorite role model outside of cricket.
Oh man, okay, that's see, my whole world is cricket right now. I would say this is probably cliche, but it really is my mom. I feel like she is. I look up to her in so many ways, and so outside of sports, she has really shaped a lot. My dad too, but yeah, I would say my parents.
Your favorite thing about Wisconsin.
Oh, Devil's Lake National State or State Park, National Park. I don't even know which, but Devil's Lake Park.
Your favorite place to eat out on tour.
In-N-Out Burger just for the strawberry milkshakes.
I was going to say your favorite beverage, but I think you've already answered that question.
I would say coffee. Coffee overall. Coffee is my favorite beverage.
Do you have a favorite coffee place that you go to?
I like my homemade coffee. Homemade is my way to go.
Your favorite pizza topping.
Pineapple.
Your favorite movie of all time.
That is a hard one. I really enjoyed 5 Feet Apart. That's a good one.
Your favorite song of all time.
Oh, there is no favorites. I'm a musician. I'm obsessed with music. So asking to pick my favorite is like picking my favorite child. Man, I would say right now what's on my repeat a lot is Violet by Water Parks.
Well, there you have it from Abey Finklea. Abby, thank you so much for coming on the Stars and Stripes Cricket Podcast. I'll give you the last word. Anything else you want to say to people tuning in that you feel they should know about you and your journey that they don't already know about you?
I would say biggest thing that I would like to leave the impression on for people is if you want to try something new, you just have to do it. It's so worth it. All the women on our team never would have had these opportunities if they hadn't said, I don't know anything about cricket, but I'm going to try out for a national team, and here they are. So try something new, push yourself to try new things, do new things, and don't be afraid of the failure because the failure is part of the journey and so important. And if you're wanting to teach people cricket, just have them play it. Just make it simple and make it enjoyable, and they'll give them that reason to love it.